Formula One is fast, glamorous and extremely exclusive. It's one of the few truly global sports in the world today.
I think the sport has developed commercially, developed monetarily, developed globally to what it is today, and it's a giant.
It's not just a sport, but a $4 billion a year business whose growth over the last 3 decades is testament to its success.
Formula One is global, and that's why you're seeing a predominance of global players involved in the sport today.
The backbone of this growth in the last few years has been its worldwide expansion. Television ratings have soared as the sport has opened up new markets. F1 is the perfect vehicle for sponsors.
It is the most global sports platform that there is out there. You sign one contract, and with that contract you get access to 17 Grand Prix around the world.
This show looks at the globalization of the sport, what's behind it, and where it goes next. Since the birth of the motor car, racing has existed around the world. But it wasn't until 1950 that a world championship started under a governing body known as the FIA. Europe would dominate the scene, hosting on average 75% of the races for the first few decades. The global expansion of the championship was limited by logistical problems with the transportation of the cars. South America would feature on the map in 1953. Asia followed in 1976, and Oceania in 1985. However, even into the 1990s, Formula One was a very European-based affair. But the sport has always exploited its commercial potential, and to do that, it's now following the markets that suit its sponsors.
If you want to be a global sport, it's got to be global. The problem we've always had is it's been a little bit Eurocentric. But then, to be fair, the Formula One World Championship was created in Europe by about 6 events that are still going, like the British, the German, the Italian, and so on, Monaco, Belgium. You can't just abandon them.
But globalization has begun to move attention away from Europe. It's pure economics, and the sport cannot hide from it.
If you look at the original G6, there were 4 European countries: Great Britain, France, Germany, and Italy. The other 2 were Japan and the USA. In 2040, Japan and USA will remain in the G6, predictions say, but the other 4 countries will not be within Europe. They will be Brazil, Russia, India and China. So what we see is started very much in a European platform, as Formula One did in 1950. But now you see very much this global platform of races around the world, with a particular emphasis in growing in those emergent nations.
The ban on tobacco sponsorship and the re-emergence of car manufacturers in the 90s helped drive F1 outside Europe.
Clearly the European automotive and the American automotive marketplace is pretty much saturated. Therefore, expanding markets which include China, South Korea, India, potentially Russia, the Middle East, places like that, that has very much driven the way the sport has changed.
But it wasn't just the car manufacturers who joined the F1 circus. The new sponsors included banks and telecommunication companies, who were also looking to expand into the emerging markets out east.
A lot of the attributes of Formula One can be applied to global business. Particularly in this century, we are seeing that if you are not a global player, you are having difficulty growing as a business. So the nature of Formula One in terms of its global presence is very similar to the nature of business and the need to be recognized on all different continents.
To understand the globalization of Formula One, you have to understand the mentality that drives the sport. It thinks like a business and recognizes the needs of the hand that feeds it.
We have a product that is in demand, and we are trying to spread that product around the world as best we can, so that as many people as possible can participate, can view it, and can experience it. I think there has been a conscious move, which I applaud, away from some of the older, more traditional environments that perhaps can no longer support the sport in the state to which it's grown.
Facilitating the global needs of the sponsors is Bernie Ecclestone, the chief executive of the Formula One Management Group. No one gets a Grand Prix without his say-so.
And Mr. Ecclestone, who is our promoter of the series, he owns the rights. He has realised that we need to be everywhere. Next year, I think we'll have 18 races, 4 or 5 in the Far East, Singapore, Malaysia, etc. Those races pay good money because they're very well televised. It's a great interest to the sponsoring companies of the sport and, of course, of the teams.
In return for their investment, sponsors get to go into markets where they're trying to establish a presence, and countries get to showcase themselves on an international platform.
Formula One has a very, very wide audience, about 170 million per week. And they're smack in the middle of our target audience for shavers. So it was a great opportunity, and we thought this was a perfect fit.
We were looking for an annual event with a championship, so something that would intrigue people for a period of time of 1 year, and that was global. To be more specific, we wanted something that was going to be strong in Asia, the Middle East, where we're growing, and that's where we felt that Formula One gave us pretty much a unique presence.
To compete in Formula One requires big bucks. Nothing in this sport comes cheap, with the average running cost of a team exceeding $300 million. And big budgets mean big sponsors, most of whom are global players.
The cost of entry to Formula One is extraordinary, and it's not just about going and partnering up with a team and badging the car and badging the driver. That's only stage one. I think there's a huge stage after that, which costs probably 3 times more than the rights you've just paid. So it's a big budget game, and you've got to go in and really calculate you're going to get a good return on it.
The cities hosting a Grand Prix are also making a global statement, and they too pay through the nose for the privilege.
The track has to pay, can be as much as $40 to $50 million a year in terms of just a race hosting fee. And those fees are going up by 10% annually. What that gets you is the rights to host the race. Simple as that. It gets you the revenues from the ticket sales, but it doesn't necessarily get you any trackside advertising money or any corporate hospitality money.
Just to break even, it's estimated a circuit must sell at least 200,000 tickets. Unsurprisingly, most of the new circuits require financial assistance from their governments. But it's considered a price worth paying.
Bernie is never ever short of countries wishing to develop and take the sport, the business of Grand Prix racing in, because a Grand Prix focusing the world's attention for a weekend, not only does it bring very significant cash into the local economy during the period of that Grand Prix, but it also puts you on the world stage in terms of television.
One of the great ironies of Formula One is that for such a global sport, 7 out of 11 teams are based within 50 miles of Oxford in England. But the staff that work for those teams are truly international, reflecting the global businesses which make up their partners in the modern day.
We don't see ourselves as an American company or a Chinese company. We see ourselves as a new world company. And if you look at Williams, engine comes from Toyota in Japan, drivers are from Germany and India. You look at an English team with an American lead sponsor with AT&T, very diverse. So I think in order to win in the emerging landscape, the emerging markets of the future, you have to be diverse.
Everything about Formula One is global. Its popularity with fans and sponsors facilitates its worldwide expansion. After the break, we look at the Formula One story from the circuit's point of view and ask, where to next for the world's most popular annual sporting event?
Formula for Success, in association with Philips Shavers. Formula for Success, in association with Philips Shavers.
Formula One is not just a sport, but a $4 billion a year business. It's glamorous, exclusive and global.
The sport has developed commercially, developed monetarily, developed globally to what it is today, and it's a giant.
The backbone of its growth has been its worldwide expansion.
And Mr. Eccleston, who is our promoter of the series, he owns the rights. He has realised that we need to be everywhere.
Emerging markets have embraced F1 and its ability to transform the profile of a country.
It has done to Bahrain what Bahrain has been trying to do for 10 or 15 years, trying to put Bahrain on the map.
The global advance means everyone benefits, from the fans to the sponsors, and above all, Formula One itself.
Formula for Success, in association with Philip Shavers.
Conquered the skies. Conquered Mount Everest. Conquered the moon. Conquered the neck. Introducing the new Philips Architect. The first Philips shaver with a flexible head which allows it to pivot and rotate fully. Now you can easily get a close shave, even on the neck. Simplicity is making hard-to-reach places easy to reach.
Formula for Success, in association with Philip Shavers.
Formula One has blossomed into the ultimate international sporting circus. It attracts massive investment from sponsors wishing to push their brand globally. It's good for the sport, and it's good for the sponsors. But what are the benefits for the host cities themselves? Most of the newer races are not in Formula One to make a profit. They're government-backed projects looking for international prestige.
It's a very prestigious event for governments to get a Grand Prix these days. Really is seen as one of those things that puts the country on the map.
In 2004, Bahrain became the latest addition to the F1 calendar. The tiny Gulf state had a passionate motorsport fan base, but this was far from the main reason for wanting to host a Grand Prix. It saw F1 as an opportunity to build its profile globally.
This was built by the government for a very specific purpose, and that was to increase the awareness and profile of the Kingdom of Bahrain. And you could argue very, very clearly that has happened 100% already.
It allows a small country to set a global ambition, to compete on a global stage, and brings the exposure and the association that comes with it.
But hosting a Grand Prix requires significant investment, not least the construction of the circuit.
The track itself was $150 million US. But the overall benefit we have received directly and indirectly to Bahrain has more than paid off the investments we've made.
With the economy largely centered around financial services and oil and gas production, Formula One provides the kingdom with an opportunity to diversify economically.
Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsports in the region. It is the pinnacle of R&D in various technologies, be it aluminium and other bits. And these are all aspects that, as a small country that wants to compete on productivity, on quality.
The Grand Prix showcases local industries, such as aluminium, to the world, while at the same time encouraging overseas business to relocate to the kingdom. Supercar manufacturer Roof are one of many overseas firms to take advantage of the favourable economic climate in the country.
They're going to be manufacturing performance cars for the road, but at the same time using the circuit as a test bed for not only testing their designs, but also shaking down the cars before they actually supply them to the customer. The wonderful thing about that is that Roof are also recognising the fact that the incentives of being here in Bahrain from a business perspective are crucial to them.
With thousands of race fans and senior executives of blue-chip companies descending on Bahrain during Grand Prix week, the capital city Manama is transformed. Since the Grand Prix's inception, advertising expenditure has increased 30%, and tens of thousands of visitors means it's boom time for the tourism sector.
When the Formula One started coming to Bahrain, we were thrilled, of course, as hoteliers, because we knew that it's going to be a good business for Bahrain. Loads of people come to Bahrain. I know for sure, and I can confirm, that all the hotel, 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, are absolutely busy, 100% occupancy. It has done to Bahrain what Bahrain has been trying to do for the last 10 or 15 years, trying to put Bahrain on the map.
Formula One is now embedded in Bahrain's modern culture. It's bought into the McLaren Group and uses the sport as a platform for economic growth. In 2009, the kingdom will be joined on the F1 map by Singapore, who plan to hold a street circuit race through the heart of the city, in what's being billed as the Monaco of the East.
For Singapore, it will take us closer to our aspiration to be one of the global cities. And I think for Formula One, it gets exposure in one of the leading business hubs of Asia.
But like Monaco, holding a street race in a crowded metropolis involves considerable cost and complexity. But the organisers feel it's worth it.
It really puts us on the world map. What better showcase do we want than to have a glamour event packed with vibrancy and packed with colour at night, with all the lighting effects and everything that we can do, and show the city in its very best light.
Singapore does throw up one challenge, which is that everybody wants to have it at night if this can be done safely. And that's a whole new departure and something we're looking at very carefully, because we've got to make sure it's safe. And then it's also got to work for the television. We've got to have a proper picture and so on. So it's quite complex.
But the relationship between the new Grand Prix and Formula One management is one of mutual interest. Just as much as Singapore wants to be seen, Formula One wants to increase its presence in the economic powerhouse of Asia.
It reflects the vibrancy of Asia. You know, Asia is growing, a lot of excitement about the opportunities in Asia. And Singapore, in a way, is a kind of a microcosm of Asia and what it is all about.
While the East has been a happy hunting ground for Formula One, there's one country which has been especially troublesome: the USA. If F1 wants to be truly global, it needs to engage the US market.
It's extremely important because the United States is still the biggest economy in the world. Problem is, they've got a massive amount of homegrown motorsport, which all evolved in the days before you could fly cars backwards and forwards across the Atlantic. So if you come along with a foreign car and a foreign series, you've got an uphill task. It's not like going to China, where it's the big event of the year in motorsport, or perhaps almost any other sport. So it's difficult to crack the American market, but nobody underestimates how important it is.
You ask most Formula One team managers where they would like to be. You know, do you want to go into China or the Middle East more, or would you like to go into North America? And they'll say, listen, North America, we'd like to see a race in Canada, a race in the United States, and possibly one other event on the calendar in that part of the world. That's how important it is, but it's also the market where Formula One faces its greatest competition from other motorsports.
The 2007 US Grand Prix was held in Indianapolis. But although it's the home of the single biggest event in motorsport, the Indy 500, it may not be right for F1.
It's only 2 or 3 major towns have the possibility to be a right partner for us. You're talking about Las Vegas, you're talking about New York, or you're talking about Miami. But you know, go racing in Indianapolis, we give a big favor to Indianapolis and not Indianapolis to Formula One.
While Formula One dreams of a street race on the Strip in Las Vegas, a successful local driver might be the most effective way of securing US interest. This has certainly worked in other countries.
The classic example is Spain. You know? Before Fernando, in Spain, the Formula One was not televised. And now we have 9 million people watching the race.
And the effect that Fernando Alonso has had on Formula One in Spain is enormous. It's one of the most heavily subscribed and popular Grand Prix on our calendar, and that's the power of a sporting icon.
driver impact is popularly known as the Schumacher effect, as his dominance gave a massive boost to local audiences in Germany, where they've reached over 20 million. Alonso is evidently having the same effect in Spain, where there will be 2 Grand Prix in 2008. With the vast audiences already in a market like China, just imagine the impact of a winning driver. There's already huge interest in India, even though it doesn't have a Grand Prix yet, and has just one test driver to help promote it.
With Williams, we have an Indian driver, Narayan Karthikeyan, and he's a rock star in India. So what happens is when you have someone like him get involved with Formula One, that starts to drive a lot of interest in the country.
Actually, I think an Indian driver like Karthikeyan would be more important than an Indian Grand Prix in terms of building interest and passion into Formula One. That would create a fantastic opportunity for all the sponsors and partners to develop their business in the Indian market.
In the 2007 championship, 25 drivers from a dozen countries have started on the grid, but none from the new markets of the East. This gives F1 even more scope for growth, while the relentless global expansion of the sport is set to continue.
Frankly, it has outgrown several of the venues, if not several of the markets in which it competes. Meanwhile, there are markets in other parts of the world that we haven't yet gone to. I think it's good that we have expanded in this way, and long may it continue. There are still some holes that we have yet to fill.
Formula One has made all the right decisions on its journey into the new markets of the world, and it hasn't finished yet. It's become one of the biggest global brands in sport, and its expansion shows no sign of abating. With the global march of F1 come better circuits, better ratings, better technology, and ultimately, a better championship. In the final show of the series, we look ahead to the future and the challenges that Formula One faces, from the competitive sports market to environmental awareness.